makes the noise.
And it's videoing.
All right. LT, we're going to describe to you what we think is going on with your transmission and to try to help you with the diagnosis. You were describing hard to put into first, but third and fourth are real easy, and second's pretty decent, and then also into reverse, which is down here. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Steve is going to explain to you exactly what is going on inside your transmission bell housing.
All right, so what we have here is your pressure plate, which is bolted directly to the flywheel on the engine. Anytime the engine is running and this is turning along with it. And in between the pressure plate and the flywheel on the back of the engine is the clutch disc. And the clutch disc is connected to the input shaft of the transmission. You can see the transmission turns when the clutch disc turns. What happens is that when you have your car in neutral and no foot on the clutch, the pressure plate is clamping the disc to the flywheel, and the whole thing turns. Let's block the wood out of the way. The whole thing turns as an assembly and turns the transmission. So when the engine is running and the car is in neutral, these gears are turning, but the gears at the bottom aren't. When you step on the clutch, you move this lever here, which pushes forward against the arms on the pressure plate, which causes the pressure plate to retract, and it opens up space between the pressure plate and the gearbox, and it allows the engine to keep turning, but it's no longer connected to the clutch, so the transmission will stop turning.
And this space is very, very minor, very thin. You just want to get this pressure plate away from this disc, and
yeah, in actuality, it'd be just like a playing card's thickness when you have your foot all the way to the floor, and that's just enough to allow this to just rest in between. We think what is happening is if your clutch drags a little bit, then it doesn't come all the way off, and so there's still a little bit of friction between the engine and the disc. I'm going to pull this off because I'm tired of fighting it. So what will happen is that since there's still a little bit of friction, the plate will still turn slowly.
Yep, still contact between the flywheel and the pressure plate. Just a little bit of light.
Yeah, just a tiny bit, just enough to just keep it turning a little bit. And if it's turning, then when you try to put it in gear, you're trying to put it in gear with everything moving, and it makes it very difficult, and it'll actually kind of make a grunch as it goes into gear because the pieces are moving. You can see.
Right,
and the same for reverse. This is first gear and this is reverse. You can see if nothing's moving, this goes back and forth easily.
But if it's moving like this and you try to get it into gear, you're going to run into
it hangs up. The
right.
piece down at the bottom is turning.
And when you're shifting, you're actually moving all these mechanical pieces inside.
Right. So what we were thinking as a test, step all the way on the clutch and count to about 3. And if you count to 3 and then it moves in gear easily, that means that this was still turning slightly, but if you wait long enough, it'll stop and then it shifts smoothly. And if that's the case, then your clutch is working just fine. It's just taking a little while for the gearbox to slow down. And so that may be the thing that you need to do. Also, you have all that insulation under your floor mat. We suggest as a test that you take the floor mat, the rubber mat, and the insulation out and just have the bare floor down there and see if it works normally.
And remember, the only thing that your car came with originally was that ribbed rubber mat on the floor. No insulation, no carpet. And your clutch pedal is designed to go down to the floor without that extra inch of insulation and carpet.
Yeah.
And so we think your clutch pedal is simply not going as far down as it should be and not releasing.
the disc as much as it can, so it's still dragging slightly.
And remember, when you're operating the clutch, you're pushing against these heavy springs, a whole bunch of springs in here, and you're pushing against your throwout bearing and these little arms right here. That's another reason why you don't sit at a stoplight with your clutch depressed, waiting for the light to change. You do not
You keep this bearing spinning the entire time, and this bearing isn't designed to spin.
under constant load like that. It's just
Right.
designed for shifting.
Yeah, it only spins normally when you're pressing on the clutch and actually forcing it in there to make the clutch work. So what you may end up having to do, if taking the carpets out and the mats out and the insulation out fixes the problem, what we may end up needing to do, or you may end up needing to do, is cut away the insulation, that thick felt foam wool insulation around the clutch pedal area, so that there's like a hole, so that when you step on the clutch, it can push the carpet down into that hole and allow the pedal to go closer to the floor to get it to last a little bit.
Right. Just want to make a hole for your clutch to go down into. That's all. What else can we help him with in terms of the shifting? And you're also, no matter what, even brand new from the factory, this is going to make a clunking noise because it actually makes a noise when you shift. Even when it's sitting still, it makes a noise. So that's the clunk you hear.
Right.
So that's fairly normal.
Right. You also will hear that clunk
Along
when
with
it's shifting. This is the equivalent of shifting into first gear, and that's the equivalent. Oh, got to get it lined up somewhere. See, this is all about alignment,
right, and it's
and this is what you're fighting. And when the gearbox is still spinning, it's really hard.
and when it's new. Remember, these are new, and so these are along with the new synchronizer rings. You're actually moving. There's balls and there's balls and springs.
Right,
And underneath
because they're
here-
designed to hold this thing. Once you hear it snap into position, you don't want this has to be difficult to move out of this position, because you don't want, while the engine's running, this to actually slip over and inadvertently do something, because then you might engage two gears at once, and that would be a problem. Also, it needs to lock into this position so that when you're driving the car, it doesn't accidentally pop out of gear and go into neutral.
Which is one of the indications when this unit is worn out. It will pop out of gear, like in first under load.
Yeah, you'll be pulling away from light. You get halfway through the intersection, all of a sudden it'll go boom, and then it'll tack up, and you'll have no power. You have to cram it back in gear.
Right. So you have the exact opposite. It's difficult to go in there, but that's because it's new and it's doing its job, holding in position. I suspect that's what you're up against. Also, the new synchronizer rings, which have grooves underneath here that grab onto tapered cones, and those are doing their job as well in terms of grabbing. That's what I think.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
So hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this helps you understand what's going on. And of course, anything that we can do, we'll do.
All right. Thanks, Lorenzo. Appreciate it.